First I had made a sketch to what I thought that the flintlock would look like, and I had added the details so I can edit them later. Because I am making Arno's gun from the trailer that you see now, I was planning on adding as much details as possible and just making it a simple gun that everyone can make. From one end of the gun to the other is 12.5 inches, and from the top of the gun to the bottom is about 3.5 inches. To make this gun, you could do it a couple different ways. You could use this stuff called foam board, if you are not aware. You can get it, this was actually a poster board you use for projects. You can get it at maybe some hardware stores. I got this one at Walmart because it's for like a school project or something. Some are thicker than others, some are stronger than others, so you should maybe compare some. Maybe, I don't know, I'm just trying to help you out because I got some bad stuff before. You could also use Ava foam. It's like gym floor mats. You can go to Home Depot and probably get a pack of 12 for like $4. At least that's the last time I checked. If you like put two together, it's pretty sturdy and it sands well and it looks pretty good. Whenever you cut or trace, this out of on the foam board or Ava foam, excuse parts like the hammer and the trigger guard and the trigger. I accidentally drew the trigger because you're most likely going to be making those out of foam board because they would be sturdier, because Ava foam, you can't really make small intricate cuts, so it would just be better all around if you just ignored those parts and added those later with some foam board or cardboard or whatever you're using. You can use an X-Acto knife, or you should use an X-Acto knife, because it is really easy to use. All you need to do is pretty much point, take your time, and just slowly cut at it until you reach all the way through, and you can just start out anywhere you want. Just really slowly cut away. If you've never used this before, take your time. Maybe use like, I don't know, something like an adult or something. I don't know. If you're like a younger viewer, I'm not aware. Just take your time. Remember, skip the trigger guard and the hammer, because you're going to be using those and making those out of foam board. If you have cut out the gun like with the flat side facing up, then you should cut it out the second time with the treads facing up, because if you don't, then they're going to be facing the same way and you have to make one side with the treads out, which is ugly to me. I needed to flip them over because then the flat sides are on both sides instead of one on the outside, one on the inside, which would be bad. And next would be to just sand off any rough edges that stick out abnormally on any other corresponding side. And you can use whatever glue you want, hot glue, Elmer's glue, anything you find suitable would most likely work. And you will also see little gaps between them, but you can take care of that later by putting glue on the inside of them, but not really right now. And to get rid of more rough edges that might stick out, you can use a Dremel or sandpaper like I have just held up. Drawn through it with a pencil and then trace that by laying it over top and then drawing the same thing through with a pencil. And I'm going to make it lower, the outside lower than that, so it sticks out and looks nice, and then round off all around that part. Before I had done anything else, I had went along the edges with a Dremel and made sure that they are even with each other so I don't mess it up later by making more indents, and just making it look nicer than what it was before. I had done a little bit more work with that, but now it is time to work on the middle part. I'm going to take the piece of paper again and lay it over top and draw that middle part down, and then that upper part on top of the middle part, which is on top of the regular gun. If you're confused, you should see later and you might understand. I hope you do. So let's get to it. Now you can touch up just a little bit more areas and make maybe this lower or that higher if you need to, and then everything around this area that I'm tracing, like behind the sketches, will be lower. And then after you do that, the same exact thing that you just made higher, make that a little bit lower than this round piece right here, and then which will be higher than the next two pieces below it. After you're done, you can touch up a little bit of details if you need to, and as you can see that they go higher as the pieces go, and there's not on the other side. You should round off the edges whenever you're all done. Instead of making it look like a square, it should look like an oval or some sort. After all the edges are rounded off, if you want to, you can see those little cracks. You can slowly put glue in and squeeze them shut just so they're shut, but if it doesn't bother you, then just ignore it and then just go on to the next step. And let's continue to build this gun. Now, if you have chosen to do this step when you put the glue in the cracks and seal it up, the next thing you have to do is make the barrels, because it is a double barrel, and the first thing you have to do is make a line with your Dremel going down the middle of the gun to make it two separate barrels, and then to round off the front to make each barrel individual and make it look detailed. I had made both of the barrels about 1/8 of an inch thick. Take your time when you cut these because they are kind of tricky. But when you get them done, they will go both on the edge of the barrels and their respective spots, and then you will glue them down. After you had made the barrel at the end of the gun, you can just leave that there after it's glued on until you start to paint. The next thing we're going to have to make is the trigger guard and the hammer. And first I had started off with this paper template-like thing that I had made just to go off from. Then I'm going to put it on some of this foam board. Like I said earlier, you can get it at Walmart, Target for like projects and such. You can also probably get it at Home Depot for maybe Home Depot, I'm not sure. But you might have to look around for whatever you can find. Be sure that when you're making this trigger guard to take your time, because it probably will be time consuming and it might break. But don't fret, because if it does break, like it did at the bottom, I don't know if you can see it or not, you can just reinforce it with some hot glue. And I suggest going all around the hot glue, with hot glue, on this, just to make it more secure. The trigger guard has been made. To hammer, all you have to do is make a hook type thing out of foam board off of a curved rectangle figure, and I'm going to show you how to hook it in this next clip. Hammer was by digging a hole with an X-Acto knife, filling it with glue, and putting the hammer in just like that. So that is to give it more support, because if I would lay it right on top, it would probably break off. And I have done the same for the part that the hammer hits off of. Hammer and the thing it hits off of is dug inside of the gun. And now next I'm going to work on the trigger guard and trigger, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to dig a hole right there and push it in with some glue. Glued in the gun, you can start to paint the gun itself. To paint the metal parts of the gun, I have used this kind of acrylic. After you paint the silver parts, the next thing you're going to have to do is tape up all the silver parts you just painted so no paint gets through when you paint the brown parts, which is going to be next. This is the kind of brown that I had used to paint the base of my gun. Whenever you paint this, be sure to paint it somewhere outside, or like somewhere else where air circulates better, and depending on how well you paint, you might need more than one coat, so you should leave the tape on. After you're done painting and take all the tape off, you are done. You have made Arno Dorian's Flintlock pistol, but you are not done yet if you continue to watch this video, because I will also show you how to make the holster for his pistol. This is the beginning of the holster tutorial. I had went to Goodwill and bought a light brown leather jacket, and I cut the sleeve off of it. Next thing I'm going to do is cut down the seam of the sleeve and cut off the inside insulation, so I just work with only leather, and I'm going to draw out a template that I had made on leather. This is the template that I had drawn up. It has an an over layer. The under layer is the whole base, and the over layer is just the part that holds the gun in, and the gun goes in like a pocket, but the over layer is just the part that holds the pocket together. If you don't understand that, just wait till later in this video. You can do two ways of making this gun. I show you both ways. The first way is to sew the over layer on, and the second way is to fabric glue it. After you make the template, you will cut it out and lay it down on the fabric you are using. I use the back of the fabric because I want the leathery side to show on the front, so I'd use the back to contrast with it. Once you had cut out that other leather part, you can go back to the template and cut out the over layer as its separate layer and put that onto the leather, and make sure that it's on the back because you would most likely want the leathery part sticking up and the bad side on the inside. So then make that its own layer, and then next I'll show you how you can sew it on. Whenever you lay it out, the over layer should be bigger than the under layer because it needs to stay open at all times but yet still be tight. So if you decide to stitch on this, if you have a stitch wheel or whatnot, it would be easier to sew because it makes the holes for you. If not, you may just take your time with regular needle and thread, and don't break the needle, and just take your time and go through this. I recommend doing this when it was unsewn, but you can take fabric and make it about 1 inch thick and goes along the edge to edge, and about a couple centimeters from the bottom, and sew that on because it's just part of the design of the holster. You could sew that on, and by the way, there's two of them, so there's one right here and another one goes in the bottom a couple centimeters away from there. You could either sew these on or you can fabric glue them, and you have options there on what you want to do. Or you can just fabric glue them whenever you make, if you make the other tutorial I made for this holster. Here is another way to make the holster for the gun that I had just made. If you would like to make the backs thicker for more support, you could just take two of the same layer, put thick cardboard between them, and fabric glue them down. Those leather strips from before and glue them just a couple centimeters away from the top and the bottom on the over part of the holster. Just like with the stitching, you're going to take the one side and that one side only, make sure it's bigger than the other, and this time you will only glue that side down and then come back and glue the other side down. Now the second way to make this holster is done, and just as usual the gun slides in just as smoothly, and personally I like this holster better, but whichever one is more maybe affordable to you or easier to you, you can just make it that way. I hope you like it, and stay tuned for more Arno.